There are 49 properties in Phoenix that date back to the 19th century. They are homes and buildings that you may live near or drive by every day. Even our state capitol building is on the list. The Planning and Development Department's Historic Preservation Office is showcasing these 19th century properties as we celebrate National Historic Preservation Month throughout May. Jones Montoya House is a great example of one of these properties and the city's rich history. It's the oldest property in Phoenix, built in 1879 at 10th Street and Buckeye Road.
I'm Kevin Waite, and I am a senior planner in the Historic Preservation Office with the City of Phoenix. Our office does historic property surveys, and one of the surveys that we did was back in 1991, where we researched all of the rural and estate homes throughout the city. And this is one of them that came up during that study, and the more we researched it, we realized this one's really old.
It was actually two separate buildings, and eventually over time, Breezeway was connected the two buildings together. And then during the Victorian era, the nice roof style that's on the building, as you can see, was added. So over time, it was in the middle of a agriculture area, so it was back in those days that the Jones Montoya families were working here. And so we're excited that we're able to bring this back to life.
Chicanos por la Casa, one of the largest Hispanic nonprofits that promotes strong, diverse communities, acquired the property in the early 2000s. David Adame is the president and CEO.
Again, so it's going to have the original wood floors in it, as much as the windows that were there, but highlighted and matched to the historic preservation component of it. And so that's the important piece, right? So that people can see how things were done in the past and what this area was like before, right before the suburban sprawl.
The City of Phoenix is very excited about this project. We provided some grant funds to help see it through to fruition, and we're very excited. Since Chicanos por la Casa has owned the property, they have done quite a bit of rehabilitation work. The porch was kind of a mess, to be honest. If you saw photos of it originally, structurally, it was not really safe to walk on. The posts were kind of dangerously leaning to one side, and so they did a lot of structural repairs to stabilize not just the porch, but the entire building.
Behind here, just north of this thing, is the Santa Rita Center, which was part of that church, but also was, historic reasons, was the place where Cesar Chavez did his big fast here in Arizona. So you had Robert Kennedy that went into the building, you had Coletta, the wife of Martin Luther King, Coletta King, that was in the building. We have photos of that. So we're going to be putting some of those photos up in this area. And you have to make sure that people behind you understand what this area was.
How often can you see a house from 1879 here in Phoenix? So this house has, again, quite a bit of history, not just for the adobe construction and the architecture, but also for the association with Dr. Jones and his story, Alcaria Montoya and her story, as a young Mexican-American who married Dr. Jones. There's a rich history here, and you can read about it in books and you can look at pictures, but it's not the same as being able to come and see the building, walk inside the building, see the construction, being able to actually touch it, feel it, and experience it firsthand. That's a whole different level of appreciation.
The area has been under charrettes and planning, and so we've been trying to assemble as much property so we can make sure that the community that once lived there have an opportunity to come back. By the church that I described earlier, Sacred Heart Church, is actually 35 acres, so we're going to be recruiting companies to come in to provide job opportunities. There's still a residential component here and some families that still live in this area, so we want to make sure that it's a jewel that they can come back to.
The front line for the historic preservation celebration of the 19th century properties, like Jones Montoya House, is appropriately staged this year at Heritage Square.
My name is Jennifer Hance, and I'm Director of Education at Heritage Square. Heritage Square consists of the 1895 Rawson House that we're in now, and we run that as a historic house museum, but it's also the rest of the original block, and it contains restaurants and galleries and shops. The Rawson House was built in 1895 by Dr. Rawson and his wife Flora, and they only lived here 2 years. Since 1980, the Heritage Square Foundation has operated the house as a historic house museum, and the property is owned by the City of Phoenix, so we're partners in maintaining and preserving this beautiful house.
The Rawson House in Heritage Square is one of the city's landmark designated properties. We have many properties on the Phoenix Historic Property Register, but only a handful that are considered landmarks because of their exceptional significance. It was in the 1970s that rehabilitation began on the property, and so it's really important to the city of Phoenix. It's a really important historic resource.
Rawson House opens its doors year-round to the public for tours and educational programs for adults and children.
The house is our biggest and most important artifact, but it's full of furniture of the period. And some of the families who lived here when it was a historic house have donated objects to us.
While there are limited properties that date back to the 19th century in Phoenix, there are more that are on the Phoenix Historic Properties Register and the National Register of Historic Places. Those include any buildings that are 50 years or older that have been identified for their historic significance. And each year, more properties are added to the lists.
It's critical that we preserve our city's history, because these historic buildings really give us a sense of place. It tells us who we are, and this is a very transient community with people coming and going. And so these experiences with these buildings really tell a lot about the history of Phoenix. So the City of Phoenix Historic Preservation Bond Funds are available to properties that are on the Phoenix Historic Property Register. And so people can apply for those funds, and it takes approval by the City Council to spend those funds. And so we have 4 different grant programs: demonstration project grants, we have exterior rehabilitation grants, low-income preservation grants, and also warehouse and threatened buildings grants.
For history buffs, May is the month each year where historic preservation gets its moment in the sun, and it's an opportunity to spark new interest in the community that can live all year long.
You can come to events such as the ones at the Rawson House or Heritage Square. You can come to City Council meetings or commission meetings to show support when someone is designating a property or requesting bond funds or grant funds to help rehabilitate their program. Maybe you live in a neighborhood that has potential to be historic. You can work with the people that are in your neighborhood to find out more about your neighborhood and you know, other buildings in the area that you might wonder about as you look around. You say, well, that looks like an old building. I wonder what's the history of that building. There's so much wonderful information out there about the history, not just from the 19th century, but as time passes, more and more buildings become eligible for the Phoenix Historic Register, and more buildings are identified and more sites identified that really warrant our protection.
To learn more about historic preservation, go to phoenix.gov/pdd/historic.